Welcome to episode 68 of Inside Deschutes County, your quick connection to the people, projects, and work happening across our community. Thanks for pressing play and letting us be part of your day. Don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or listen anytime at deschutes.org/podcast.
Deschutes County is an amazing place to live,
Ease of access,
work, and play.
Great place to raise a family.
I love the weather and the high desert.
At Deschutes County, we provide excellent service.
Beautiful.
We're here to help you.
Deschutes County is the heart of Oregon.
Everyone wants to be here.
Welcome to another episode of Inside Deschutes County. I'm Eric Brion. Well, today we're talking about the future of Terrebonne and how the community can help shape it. I am joined by Tanya Saltzman. She's a senior planner with Deschutes County who's been helping lead the update to the Terrebonne Community Plan. Welcome, Tanya.
Thanks, Eric.
Well, this is a big effort. It's a long-term effort. It's going to help guide growth and development and priorities. Over the next 20 years for Terrebonne? Something like that?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Am I close?
Yeah, you're spot on.
Okay. Well, for those... Welcome back, by the way.
Oh, thanks.
So glad you're here.
It's fun to be here.
This is, I think, your third time on.
I think that is correct. Yeah.
Yeah. You're a regular guest now, so it's kind of like I liken it to, you know who Bob Uecker is? Mm-hmm. He was on the Tonight Show
Yes.
over and over and over and over again. We'll try not to get you to Bob Uecker status.
I was thinking of the Five Timers Club on SNL.
Oh, there you go.
Going in a
Yeah,
jacket.
there you go. There you go. Well, okay, Tanya, so let's jump into this. So for those who may not be familiar, tell us, big picture, what is the Terrebonne Community Plan and why is it being updated right now?
Yeah. So the Terrebonne Community Plan is just like it sounds. It's a community plan for the community of Terrebonne. And technically, it is a component of the comprehensive plan. And you may have heard about the comprehensive plan over the last couple of years. It was
A few times.
A few times.
Yeah.
It's just a little thing we worked on. It was a pretty enormous project. It's kind of the World Series of planning documents for
Gotta get some more baseball in there. Bob Uecker and the World Series. There we go.
You know, it's the guiding document
Yeah.
kind of for the themes and priorities and goals within the county. So the comprehensive plan is countywide, but we also have a few area plans for unincorporated communities, which include Tumalo. We recently did that one a couple years ago. There's also one in Sisters Country, as well as Newberry Country. So a few areas of the county get their own special plans, and they're technically an appendix to the comprehensive plan, so they're updated on a different schedule. But they're kind of a mini comprehensive plan. And the goals for those are to assess the people who live in the community, what they want to see what's the vision for their community within the next 20 years. So do they want to see it grow? Do they not? How and where might they want to see it grow? What types of businesses might they want to see, not want to see?
You're going to get some opinions on
We are,
that.
and yeah, we are, and that's what we want.
Yeah.
You know, and once we have that set, you know, it's ultimately a set of goals and policies. Once that plan is set, that eventually gets translated into potential zoning code updates. So that's where kind of the nitty-gritty of the actual code that the county operates their land use system in is the zoning. But ultimately, right now, it's very big picture, very kind of aspirational, goal-oriented about just what people want to see in Terrebonne.
So you recently held the first open house on April 7th.
Yes.
About this. Mm-hmm. How did that go overall?
I thought it was great.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Well, good.
So which is always great. It was held at the school in the evening after work. And we had, I haven't counted officially yet, but we had, I think, about 50 people come, which is great.
Nice.
Because it was lovely weather. People could be doing a lot of other things. So we love it when people come to these events. But so that was our first open house. And the goal for that was to just receive input from the community. Just kind of the first blush of kind of, you know, give it to us. Tell us what you want.
Take it all in.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So we had, it wasn't kind of one big presentation or anything like that, but it was an interactive series of stations around the room. So we had different posters that talked about different aspects of the community. So for instance, housing. This is the type of housing that exists in Terrebonne now. Here's some other types. What do you think? similar stuff about commercial, and then just people's general community vision. So people could kind of roam around the room and either talk to us or put their thoughts on a Post-it note, put it on the poster, and that's kind of our first round of input and just hearing what people want and don't want. And we also had a few of the special districts there, which I thought was super helpful. We had the Terrebonne Sanitary District, the Terrebonne Domestic Water District, and Oregon Department of Transportation, ODOT there. So they could answer the technical questions because there's a lot going on there right now.
There's a few things.
Some
I was going to
projects,
ask.
yeah.
So you're taking all this information in, and they're writing stuff down, but you're there, you and staff, having conversations. Did anything stand out from those conversations as to kind of what they're concerned about, or did you already know? Like, or you had a good idea as to what people might be saying?
We had some hunches, I will say, just based on our previous experience in the community. And we know there's a lot going on right now. There's a lot of road work happening there. If anyone's driven through, obviously they've probably seen there's some diversions and there's a lot of stuff happening. So a lot of people's thoughts had to do with that, even though that isn't technically our purview in the planning department, but of course it's related if you live or work in the community or have to get through it. So there were a lot of thoughts about that. You know, they're in a transition period right now, so everything's a little bit crazy until that project is done. And then there's the potential or there is anticipated sewer coming to the area, which is a biggie. So that has the potential to change things. So we heard people's thoughts about that. In general, people live in Terrebonne because they love the rural quality of it. You know, they were like, we don't want to live in Bend. We want to live in Terrebonne. We want a rural, quiet, small town community, which frankly didn't come as much of a surprise. I think you'd be surprised if someone lived in Terrebonne and wanted big city life. That's just not what it is.
We want big box stores.
Yeah. So they liked the scale of it, the way it is right now. And a lot of people said, you know, we have a few businesses there for specialty stuff. We'll go to Redmond or we'll go somewhere else, and we're good with that type of thing. So that's relatively what we expected.
Was there any kind of, I imagine there might be some confusion, or at least the lines are a little gray as to, okay, this is a district issue, this is a ODOT issue versus what the county might be doing.
Yes.
How do you lay that out? I know you had them there, but I imagine they're wrapping it all into one. And what is it that the county is hoping to accomplish versus that's separate from what those agencies are working on? Do you get where I'm coming from?
And this is a tough one because we struggle. You know, if you live in the community, you don't care who the agency is who's doing this stuff that's tearing up your road or tearing up your sewer or whatever it is. You know, you just care about how it affects your life and your future and your daily experience in the community. So, you know, this plan does not speak to specific levels of infrastructure, like how the water gets where it's supposed to go or the sewer, but we have them as partners to be there to be able to answer those technical questions. So, you know, it's a tricky thing because our plan is much more, the Terrebonne Community Plan will be much more general. You know, it's not going to necessarily call out very specific areas or routes or things like that. It's more general themes. Those other infrastructure projects might affect that, and that's why we had them there. So if people really wanted to delve into the details of, you know, what's happening with this street and when, they talk to ODOT. And so we're trying to just have everybody at the table so that at least everybody's on the same page, because there has been some confusion about, for instance, the sewer, if people will have to connect or they won't have to connect. So rather than us speaking on behalf of these agencies, they are the experts. So we were able to refer them to them, which I think was helpful for us. And then based on me speaking to them at the end, they really appreciated that, to just be able to, you know, the horse's mouth, you know, they were just right there. And I think the community also appreciated just having everybody in the same room, and you could just go from table to table and be like, hey, what's the deal? You know?
Well, I'm sure a lot of questions for them.
Yes.
What are some of the key topics this update then is going to focus on over the next 20 years then? If it's, because I'm thinking, in their mind, it's probably road or it's probably, sanitary or whatever. And does that get wrapped in? Or how does all that kind of work?
Well, I can speak to certainly part of that.
Obviously, I'm not asking you to answer their questions.
Of course.
Yeah.
So, for instance, given the future existence of sewer, this unlocks potential areas of development, because right now Terrebonne has suffered from a lot of septic failures, so it's hard to develop there. A lot of people have failing septics, or their ability to build on a lot is limited because there's not septic capacity, and this is for a host of reasons. I'm not a sanitarian, but we can get him on your next show and he can explain why things flow the way they do. But basically, there's been a kind of inherent limitation on what you can do and build in Terrebonne. Having a sewer in certain areas will unlock this. So that means that in theory, you might be able to build denser housing in the main areas of Terrebonne. And our question is, do people want that? If this is an allowable thing, is that a direction that people want to go? Do they want to stick with single family homes? I think housing is going to be a big part of it, and just kind of what kind of development do people want to see? They're probably so used to being limited by this septic limitation that when those limits are taken away, what are their options and what do they want to see?
It's almost like breadcrumbs. I mean, it's like you're kind of one thing unlocks another thing, which unlocks another thing, and you're trying to figure out what the overall scope might
Exactly.
be. Is that fair to summarize it that way?
Zoning is sort of our language that we in planner world.
And one I will never understand.
The mythical world of zoning. It's very complicated. But that kind of provides a universe and the limitations on what you can and can't do, whether that's height or lot coverage or, that type of thing. So that's kind of putting the borders around that. It doesn't mean that everything's going to be built to that maximum. And I think sometimes people get concerned that all of a sudden everything's going to be built up like crazy. But really, it's a slow process. It depends on kind of properties changing hands and people having a project. It's a very slow thing. But if that kind of top level bar changes, that's what we're talking about. So just seeing that, designing that envelope to see kind of what those limitations may or may not be is kind of the one of the goals of this.
Well, how does the feedback now that you're collecting, do you think it's going to have a big impact on this final plan?
I do. I think, even though we have a general sense of the sentiment, I think, it all depends on some of the nuance that we hear from people. And sometimes ideas come out of nowhere that we're like, that we never thought about this, whether that's spatially, people are just talking about a certain corner of the area that we haven't given consideration to. Maybe this could be something else. I think just setting the goals and policies for the balance of commercial and residential will be interesting. So again, we have general ideas, but I think the finesse will come when we go back to the community and say, do you like these goals and policies? And some of them are very general. Some of them are things like, or maybe, coordinate with other agencies. It's kind of a aspirational policy type thing. And some is, encourage sidewalks in area X or something like that. So that's the type of thing where input is really helpful.
Is there anything that surprised you that you may have heard at the open house?
No, we just had some really good stories. We had, not
Kevin?
surprising.
Kevin.
Yes, Kevin. A gentleman named Kevin, who I've already talked about with my colleagues. He was born and raised in Terrebonne, born in the 30s, from what I recall, and I think he lived in California for a little while. But he was just telling me stories about what it used to be, and he was like, there used to be 3 houses on this side of the road, and there were 4 horses here at the school, and just this well that was in the middle over here had a structure, and now it's the center of a road. Just very interesting observations about what it was like there. It was small. It was very small.
Well, I think that's so interesting because you're kind of, balancing. Terrebonne has a really unique character to it, and now you're trying to balance growth while preserving what people love about that community. And that's a tricky dynamic,
It
Tanya.
is. Yes. This is the
mean,
tension of everything we do.
I'm sure that was tricky in Redmond. I'm sure it was tricky, and it's still tricky in Bend and La Pine. That's how do you navigate that in your world?
I mean, that's a really good question.
We
we struggle
don't.
with this, yeah. Especially in these unincorporated communities, Terrebonne and Tumalo, for instance. It's a rural, but there's still there's still stuff kind of in a central area. There's commercial, there's restaurants, there's that type of thing, and figuring out exactly how much of that people want is really hard, and people want different things. That's kind of my job, is to try to kind of navigate that. And we don't always get it right, but we try to, arrive at options that kind of can please most people. A lot of people are like, I don't want anything to change ever. And I think that's a natural human emotion. I've had that emotion about places that I've lived as well, but recognizing that, you generally cannot close the doors to a community. Not any of the communities here, but you can find ways to manage that growth so you still retain that character while still allowing for some economic development. Do you want to have a supermarket? Do you want to have these types of things that make your daily life easier? So figuring out that balance and doing it in a smart way, that's what we're trying to get to the crux of.
Is there anything, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Is there anything that's been talked about that kind of excites you about Terrebonne's future?
We're not at that stage yet. I know that's a lame answer. I
Wow,
realize that. I know
totally
that's a cop-out.
ignored my
But
question.
we're just receiving. So
Yeah,
we don't,
yeah.
the magic will happen when we're really kind of deciding on the kind of goals and policies. So now we're just hearing people.
All right, I'll let you go on that one. Okay, so the online, the open house, the in-person one, is there more?
That was the first of
The
what we
first.
anticipate will be 3 throughout
3.
the rest of this year.
Okay, so there's more in-person open houses coming, but are there other ways for people to participate now?
Yes. So this first open house, as I've mentioned, is kind of our first round of receiving input from the community, and that took place on April 7th. We have an online open house, which is basically the exact same thing, but through the magic of computers, and that's available till the end of April 30th, on our project website, which I believe is www.deschutes.org/TCP. Basically, we turned all of the posters that we had in the cafeteria at the school into just an online version. So you're looking at the exact same materials, and you have, instead of Post-it notes or sticky notes that you're going to put on a poster, you have just a place to type. So it's also a place for those who came to the open house who couldn't fit all their thoughts on a sticky note, or just, they didn't think of stuff right then. I was joking to a lot of them that some of my best thinking comes at 3 a.m. when I'm lying awake at night. And maybe that's when they want to log onto the computer and, provide us with thoughts that they can type and sort of at their leisure. So that'll be open for the month of April.
So the online open house, what happens next in the process? Now that you've got one in-person open house under your belt, you've got the online open house, but what's going on in your world to gather that information and put this together?
Yeah, so we're going to, once the online open house is done, we will be preparing a summary of that community engagement. So kind of a report just saying, what we did, how many people we got, here are the general themes we heard. Usually with the online stuff, we can actually, it'll develop a report and give us all of the kind of answers, whether those are free-form typed in or kind of, I think most of them are free-form typed in for this one, but it spits it all back out to us. So we provide that as an appendix, photos of the open house, just a summary of what was received. And so we're basically saying this is what we heard. And so the next step will be open house number 2, which will be later in the summer, and we're going to be coming back with those same themes and saying exactly what's in that report. So this is what we heard. Did we get this right? This is what you guys said about housing. Like, is that right? Do you have more to add? Is there more nuance to that? Or, we might have some follow-up questions. You said you want this kind of housing, but do you mean this or that type of thing?
Massaging it, right?
Exactly. So really just making sure that the community has been heard properly. giving it back to them what we think that we heard, and then providing, giving the public an opportunity to either correct that or add to it.
For someone who's on the fence about participating, what would you say to encourage them to get involved when it comes to this process?
I would say we have snacks
Good
at the
ones.
online open house.
Good ones. Community development
I
has
think
all
that is
good ones.
not to make light of it, but I think having snacks is really helpful in general, in life, in all things. But I do think it's really easy, especially the online version. You don't have to be an expert. You just have to know your community and what you like. There's no wrong answer. It's like, how do you feel about living in Terrebonne or working in Terrebonne, what have you? We're not, these things are anonymous. We're not saying, okay, Joe Smith said this, so therefore, consequences. It's very, we just want people to be heard. So it's kind of the same type of thing that when they're driving through and they're thinking, I wish this was like this over here, or this, that's what we want to hear. So it's very simple. We don't need anything fancy. We just want people's thoughts about their experiences and their hopes.
And you're thinking this is wrapped up in a year?
Yeah, within the year. We hope to do the bulk of the community engagement this year. So the second open house, kind of the second half of the summer, and then we'll have another open house later in 2026 to talk about as we turn those thoughts from the community into specific goals and policies, and those kind of form the backbone of the plan document itself. And then early in the year, this document that we will create ultimately has to go through a hearings process with the Board of County Commissioners and the Planning Commission. So, roughly a year, give or take. Things happen sometimes, but that's our goal.
Yeah, they do. They do. Well, Tanya, thanks for being here. You're
for
always so
having
good at
me.
explaining this stuff. It can be a little complicated.
It's hard. Yeah.
And that's why you've been on so many times, is because you're so good at explaining these things. So
Thank
just
you.
appreciate you taking the time to join us, to walk us through the process. It's really helpful to hear kind of how much thought and community input goes into something like this on these plans, whether Tumalo or Deschutes 2040 or now Terrebonne. I mean, you guys put so much work and effort. Kudos to you and your team and everybody you work with. I'm excited to see what's happening next with it.
Me too.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
In this episode, we were joined by Tanya Saltzman, a senior planner with Deschutes County, to talk about the Terrebonne Community Plan update and what it means for the future of the area. This long-term plan will help guide growth, development, and priorities in Terrebonne over the next 20 years, and community input plays a huge role in shaping that vision. If you'd like to learn more or share your feedback, you can visit deschutes.org/TCP to explore the online open house and stay connected throughout the process. If you'd like to hear more of these conversations, you can find us at deschutes.org/podcast. But until next time, please be safe out there